Back in April, the Popover API gained baseline cross-browser support, and it has received so much fanfare due to its ability to be triggered declaratively with just a couple of HTML attributes. I'm so here for this because, as a web performance specialist, it enables my favourite activity, deleting legacy JavaScript implementation. But there's an upcoming API in the works that's taking this a step further. It's been available as an experimental feature of Chrome for some time now, and I've used it for the best part of a year. On my consultancy website and on various client websites, of course I'm using a polyfill for that, and it's called the Invoker Commands API. By way of an executive summary, this gives you 1. A declarative and therefore clearer and easier to debug implementation. 2. Less JavaScript to bog down performance or for you to maintain in the long run. And 3, a platform standardized API that frameworks and libraries can all agree to speak. Much like the Popover target attribute implemented by the Popover API, this API lets you specify command for, an attribute which allows you to target any element using its ID. And like Popover target action, which is quite the mouthful, we now have just command. Initially, the supported commands are purely going to be for popover and dialog elements, so we'll finally gain that native mechanism for opening dialogues without JavaScript. But there's a whole bunch of other proposed native commands in the works, such as stepping up or down a number input field, or playing and pausing videos and audio, for example. This all works to remove endless boilerplate JavaScript where all we're doing is hooking up custom click handlers, often coupling our elements together. Taken in individual instances, attaching an event handler to do something like toggle an attribute in the DOM isn't generally going to have a measurable negative impact on performance, unless you do something really stupid, of course. But collectively, as sites grow, it has knock-on effects. Firstly, it's simply more JavaScript code to maintain, and no one's going to argue with me that maintaining even well-written JavaScript is better than just using a couple of native HTML attributes. But secondly, probably more importantly, as soon as we introduce JavaScript, we have to consider our loading strategy. Do we just inline the event handling script? Do we create a custom element and then load that in via a separate JavaScript resource? Does this all become part of a larger bundle, which can mean that they're loaded when unnecessary? When does this script get loaded? And what happens if someone triggers the event in the time between the element rendering on the screen and the script executing to add the handler in? Of course, many people don't even consider this. They just leave it to whatever framework they're using, assuming that it'll do a pretty decent job. And that can become a problem. As sites grow, JavaScript performance becomes death by 1,000 cuts. But I don't want to stop here on a negative note. There's one more important feature of this new API that I've not mentioned yet and I'm super excited about, and that's custom commands. So when buttons with a command are activated, they'll send a command event to their target. Within this event is the standardized command attribute, which lets the element know which command has been triggered, so it can handle multiple different ones, and a source representing the button that triggered that command. You might be wondering how this is different to things like listening on the button being clicked and sending a custom event to the target. Well, beyond the reduction in all that boilerplate that I've already mentioned, it's all about the standardization. Yes, you could implement this using custom events, manually adding your equivalent of the command and source attributes to the metadata of the event. But then that requires that your project and any third-party libraries and frameworks all agree on that API as a form of contract, or provide a means of configuring what to expect, which again is more code. Standardization means we can create shareable web components which require literally nothing more than some HTML buttons to interact with via a web platform API that you can rely on sticking around for a long time. One which produces clear declarative HTML, and all this together is a huge boon for the web. Finally, custom events provide us a straightforward path to polyfilling unreleased native events, such as the step-up one that I mentioned earlier. And speaking of polyfilling, if you want to give the API a go today, which I encourage, Keith Kirkle of GitHub has built and maintained one throughout the evolution of this API spec, so I wouldn't hold back on getting yourself familiar. If you want to know more about the Invoker Commands API, It's worth checking out the explainer on the OpenUI website. And finally, I want to give a huge shout out again to Keith Kirkle from GitHub and to Luke Wallow of Igalia, among many other contributors, for all their hard work on this API. I'm absolutely buzzing for the day that this leaves the experimental phase and becomes available in all browsers.